Hello, today we're going to talk a little bit about layout, which means the organization of your web pages. Okay, so we're going to be working on a textbook example. So you can see in this example here where they have this web page, and you can see it's some coffee shop or something like that, where they do have this top part, which is very common in web pages, a header. Okay, and then we have two parts of content. So they have the main content here. They have this, what they call a sidebar, I guess. So kind of like a two-column effect. And you'll see this is quite often in many web pages, 2 or 3 columns. Okay, so you might want to decide to organize your content like that. And then at the bottom here, we have something like a footer, like copyright information, social media links, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to achieve. Okay, and we're going to download the code from chapter 11. So this is what it's going to look like at first. So let's just go ahead into our file explorer here, and from my zip file I'm going to take chapter 11 and I'm going to grab it and put it somewhere like here, put it in my 130, chapter 11. Yeah, let's put it there. Okay, so there we have chapter 11 so that we can work on it. Remember, you can't work within the zip file. That's why you have to copy it to somewhere else. Okay, so let's go into chapter 11 here. And we're working on the star buzz. That's right here. Don't go to the complete one. That's the one that's already done. If you want to see what the completed one looks like, you can go in there and take a look. But the one we're going to work on is this one here. Okay. And let's just go and open this. You can see that it is an index, and we'll open with Firefox. Okay, so you can see that it is in fact like this, and we're going to get that two-column effect. So let's go into Komodo here. I have some things open with the lounge. I'm just going to get rid of those so I don't get confused. And we're just going to take the stuff from Starbuzz and drop them in there, like so. Okay, so basically there's the CSS, and this is the HTML code that generates this brown web page that you just saw there. Okay, and so this is what we're going to be working with. And first of all, what we want to do is we want to take this sidebar, this right here, this sidebar here, and we want to float it to the right. You can see they're stacked one on top of each other, right? Here's our main content. This is going to be our sidebar. We want it over there. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to take that sidebar and I want to move it above the main content. That way when it floats, it doesn't float below, but it floats before the main content. So I'm just going to Control X there. Go above my main content, right there, between the header and the main content. Let's paste it there. Okay, so once I have it there, you can see that first I'm going to float the sidebar, and then the main content should come up next to it. Okay, so let's go into our CSS sidebar, and we'll add a float. Right. Okay, so I'll save that, save my index, and let's reload. And oh wait, I forgot to give it a width. Okay, so let's fix that. Let me just double check the width that they want in the textbook. So that would be a width of 280. So we'll put that there as well too, width 280 px. Save and reload. Okay, so there's our sidebar there. Okay, and you can see that, like we said before, since it's floating, the things actually kind of move up, right? So the main content moved up. Same with the footer, moved up and is actually behind this this sidebar. Okay, which is not necessarily what we want. We don't want it behind. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a margin for these. Okay, so my main content margin. If you recall, the 4 values, top, right, bottom, left. Okay, so I'm going to modify the right one, top, right, and this one's right. So 330 px I think is enough. I don't put just 280, I need more because there's all sorts of margins and padding on that sidebar. Okay, so I need to increase that so that I get enough space there. Reload. Okay, and that looks kind of nice, except for the footer is still there. When my window is somewhat small, it works nicely, right? But when my window is larger, you can actually see this, the footer ends up behind that. Now, I don't want to set a margin on my footer because then that would make my footer end right there, which would kind of look stupid. If it was like that, then the footer would kind of end right there. It would look kind of funny. What I actually want is I want this footer to always remain under this stuff, okay? And the way to do that is to say, I don't want anything to float on top on the right side of the footer. So what we do is we put a property called clear, okay? And we clear the right side, meaning that if there's anything overlapping on the right, bump it down, okay? So let's go over here, over to the footer section, and we're going to put a clear, and you can see that there's right, left, both, okay? If you want to do both, that's often safe just to say that don't let anything overlap on either side, but here I'm pretty sure it's just the right side, so I'm just going to put clear right. Right. And reload, and you can see that bumps it down, and no matter what the size is, that footer will always clear that thing, okay? So just to summarize, this thing was floated, so it was on top of everything. Everything gets moved up, right, and kind of underneath the floated item, okay, including the footer, right, went up, floated behind. This one I set a margin on this side so that we get that space so it doesn't go under. This one we just did a clear so it just goes underneath the floated item. Now I'd like to kind of play around with this a little bit more just to kind of show you different things that you might want to consider. This is one way to do things, but it's not the only way, okay? At the moment right now, this sidebar has a fixed width, and these other things, this main part and the footer header are left as sometimes I call them elastic, sometimes I call them like liquid. What that means is they just take the width according to whatever my window is. Okay, so if my window is this big, obviously the header and footer become that big, and the main content stretches. Okay, whereas the sidebar has a fixed width and doesn't stretch or compress. Okay, in some cases you might want to set the width of both of them, and let me just show you what happens if I do that. So let's go back to Komodo, and I'll set a fixed width on my main content. Okay, so let's set a width here, and we'll put it something like oh, I don't know, 600 pixel. No, maybe that's too much. Maybe let's try 500 pixel. Okay, save that, and let's go back here and reload. And so you can see that it creates this huge gap in between. That's because this has been floated to the right, and this is just content that hasn't been floated. It just kind of goes up there and just starts from the side. Okay, so you can see that, you know, if my window size was actually like that big, this would look perfect. Okay, but the problem is when people resize the window, that happens, and both of those are fixed width. And you can see that when I get even smaller, what happens is the width of that remains the same. The inline content gets wrapped around to the next line. You can see that happening. So sometimes an undesired effect there. Okay, but sometimes that it is necessary to fix the width of certain things. So just know that you can do that, but this is the effect that happens. Okay, So let me just try to do something else. Okay, so I know that this is about 500 pixels, okay, and this is 280, so roughly we're talking around 800 pixels. Maybe I'll work with 850 or something like that, just to be sure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put everything in a container. Okay, so all this stuff is going to be put in a container, and I'm going to set the width of that container to be about 850 or so, and see how that works. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's go into my index page, and I want to put everything. So starting from the very beginning of the body, I'm going to put a div here. So let's see here. Okay, div id equals container. Okay, got my quotations there. Okay, and the end of this div is going to go all the way down to the very last thing, right? My footer here, and it's going to end here. Okay, and just so I don't confuse myself, you can see that things can get confusing. I have lots of end divs, so here would be a great place to put a comment, right? End of container. Okay, and I might even put a comment here like end of footer or whatever. Okay, next thing I need to do is since all this stuff is being contained, I'm gonna tab it over. So I'm gonna highlight all of that up to here and press tab, and everything gets indented, and you can see everything is contained in this container div. Okay, now what's left, save it, is I'm going to go into my CSS and I'm going to style this container. Okay, so style the container. Make sure ID container, right? Container, and then I'm going to put a width of 850 pixel, and I'm going to put a border just so you can see it. Border 1 pixel solid red. Okay, so save that. Go here and reload. Okay, so now you can see that everything is contained inside, and you can see 850 hasn't been enough. That there is still that overlap, but you can see the red container there with that border. Okay, so let's go back and fix that. 850 isn't quite enough. Let's put 900. And reload. Okay, so you can see now I guess kind of more or less, maybe that gap is a little bit big, but you know, you can fine tune that, maybe 890, 880 or something like that. Okay, and you can see no matter how big my window gets, that thing is still right there. Okay, now it would be nice if this thing, this whole big block, was in the middle. Okay, do you remember how to do that? We can just put margin left auto, margin right. Margin right auto. Okay, save and reload, and there you have it. Okay, something that stays nice in the middle and a nice centered web page. Okay, I'm going to stop this video and continue on part 2 because I'm running low on my 15-minute limit, but I'll continue this in part 2.